I actually think data monetization is the ideal way to create a self-funding data and analytic infrastructure. And in fact, ought to be aspirational, I think, for any data and analytic leader or chief data officer.
Welcome to This is Digital, a podcast brought to you by West Monroe. Join us as we talk to leading experts about bringing the digital mindset to your organization.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to This is Digital, a podcast about leading with digital to win in the marketplace. I'm your host, Rissa Redden, Partner and Chief Marketing Officer here at West Monroe. West Monroe is a digital services firm. We are thinkers and makers who bring hands-on experience and technical know-how to get things done and to deliver lasting value. On This is Digital, we talk to experts about how to go about not just doing digital, but being digital. We'll be sharing stories of digital successes and digital failures. This podcast is for business leaders like you who don't want to miss out on the opportunities digital holds. I'm joined today by my West Monroe colleague, Doug Laney. Doug is an innovation fellow at West Monroe, where he advises across our organizations on topics such as data monetization, valuation, analytics best practices, and big database innovations, just to name a few. In addition to his role at West Monroe, Doug is also a speaker and best-selling author, as well as a contributor for the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, and the Financial Times. He even teaches graduate-level courses at the University of Illinois and Carnegie Mellon. I'm excited to hear Doug's point of view on how companies can start the data monetization process, and we'll also get into how companies should get started working with consulting firms such as West Monroe. With that being said, welcome, Doug Laney.
Thanks, Rissa. Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining. I am delighted to chat with you. And as everybody can tell from your bio, you have a very robust background. Could you tell us a little bit more about it and what led you to where you are today?
Well, it starts with kind of a funny story. Originally, I was a math computer science major at University of Illinois. The first day of differential equations class, the professor grabs a handful of chalk. He turns his back on the class and he fills up the chalkboard with these formulas for about 30 minutes. And it was certainly meant to intimidate us. It definitely intimidated me. We guessed what he was doing and we all guessed wrong. It turns out he had solved some proof in the 1960s and anyway, kind of wanted to intimidate us. But, I realized at that point I was more interested in the business aspects of computing rather than the math. So I submitted a plan for individual plans of study at the university. At the time, there was no such degree, so I created this independent plans of study curriculum, which was unanimously rejected by the committee because they said, who would ever want to use computers for business? Yeah, wow. So anyway, it finally got pushed through. After I graduated, my advisor called me and told me, said, that curriculum you created, they're now using it as the basis for a permanent MIS degree. So that's kind of cool. So after I graduated, I went straight to Andersen Consulting, back when it was actually Arthur Andersen Consulting, well before it became Accenture. Then I got into the expert systems world, developing some AI applications for business. And then a colleague dragged me into this thing called data warehousing, which sounded really boring. It ended up being pretty interesting, all about how to organize data for analytics. At that company, we built the first methodology for how to run data warehouse and analytics projects. And through a series of acquisitions, IBM ended up owning the company and the methodology, and still uses the methodology some 25 plus years later. While I was kind of developing that methodology, I started speaking about it at conferences and got noticed by Gartner. One of the seniors, executives or research directors at Gartner said, "Hey, did you create those slides yourself?" And I said, yeah, why? He said, "Well, do you want a job with Gartner?" And I'm like, okay. So that's how I ended up at the research firm Gartner. And then from there, a couple other consulting firms we won't mention, and then came to West Monroe.
Currently, you serve as an innovation fellow at West Monroe. Mm-hmm. What does that mean? What is that role like?
West Monroe has several innovation fellows who are each chartered with things like developing and bringing new technologies or strategic solutions to market. So it's really great that West Monroe has like this innovation function, in addition to being innovative across the board. My role in particular feels sometimes like a kind of a three-ring circus, where I'm introducing new data-related strategic offerings like data monetization and data valuation and data diligence. Also being involved in market-facing activities like speaking and publishing and teaching, and then also keeping in the mix by participating on client engagements as a data and analytics strategist. doing things like helping clients conceive new ways of generating benefits from their data, implementing enterprise data and analytics operating models, advising data and analytics leaders and chief data officers. So basically, my focus is really across the board on helping our clients really put their data to work better.
Doug, I want to kickstart our conversation today with something that we like to ask everyone on our podcast. What does digital mean to you?
I'm kind of a simple Midwestern guy, so we'll keep it simple. Digital is really the possibilities and innovation at the intersection of data, technology, and the human experience. So when you look at any digital solution out there, it typically combines those three aspects. Data is the lifeblood of digitalization. It's necessary input that captures the essence and the details of what we call at Gartner a business moment of some kind, which then feeds some technology, hardware or software, which then automates or streamlines or sometimes even eliminates a process to improve some process. Often a process that involves or involved human interaction. Think about like the evolution of vinyl to music streaming, or from brick and mortar shopping with cash to online shopping with credit. In each of these cases, data is what feeds the technology, which then improves the user experience. I think organizations that are looking to digitalize aspects of their business really need only to kind of identify what are those business moments in their kind of systemic inefficiencies they have, and then determine what kind of data could be captured about them and the technology components to automate something. But as we talk about at West Monroe, becoming a digital business is really more than just about doing digital stuff. It really requires a mindset baked into the corporate DNA, where you're constantly evaluating and really no longer accept the manual or inefficient processes that are status quo. I think it's a mindset where you're looking to reinvent the business around the ideal customer or partner or employee experience.
I want to turn now to your books, Doug. So your 2017 book, Infonomics, How to Monetize, Manage, and Measure Information as an Asset for Competitive Advantage, was a bestseller, a must-read book of the same year, and a top 5 book. The accolades are numerous. And then, more recently, you've written Data Juice, 101 Stories of How Organizations Are Squeezing Value from Available Data Assets. Could you share a brief overview about each of those books, maybe starting with Infonomics?
Infonomics, published about 5 years ago, was the culmination of a kind of a decade or more of exploring how to treat data as an asset and how to take advantage of data's unique economic properties. We kind of looked into the economics of information. That's the nomics part. It's really kind of 3 books in one. The first part, is about how to generate new and innovative value streams from data in a variety of ways and how organizations are doing that. We've actually identified now a dozen distinct what we call data monetization patterns. The second part is really about how to apply classic, well-honed asset management principles and practices from the world of like physical asset management, IT asset management, financial asset management, human capital management, and other disciplines we even looked at like library science and even ecology, all with the purpose of improving the way that data is managed. The third part of the book is about how to measure data as if it were like a balance sheet asset, along with how to measure its intrinsic value, its business relevance, and various quality characteristics. And then there's a couple chapters, one on kind of applied economics, looking at things like supply and demand and productivity frontiers and marginal utility, and how those were all originally designed with traditional goods and services and labor in mind, and nobody's ever really thought about how do they apply to data, and if they don't, how would we revise them to do so, and then what could data and IT and business leaders learn from applying those concepts. So there's one chapter in the book that deals with that, and then there's a book on kind of data and analytics trends as well. As a general hypothesis, I started kind of with a classic one, which is, I think it's Peter Drucker was credited with saying, you can't manage well what you don't measure well. And I think it follows that you can't monetize well what you're not managing well. You can't generate benefits from what you're not managing well. So kind of getting to Data Juice, so throughout the Infonomics book, I included dozens of real-world examples of how organizations are monetizing and managing and measuring data as an asset. And I've been collecting these stories for years. Clients really like these examples, so I decided to compile dozens of them into my next book, Data Juice, which published over the summer. I really wanted to offer more than just stories, so I wanted to kind of be prescriptive as well. So I invited data and analytics leaders and thought leaders and consultants and others throughout the world to provide a commentary on a story. So while the stories themselves are inspirational or kind of also meant to shame companies into doing more with their data, the commentaries themselves from the experts are really quite instructive.
I agree with that. And I think it's interesting to have both. You have, sort of the facts of the matter, but then to have that expert perspective layered on top to tell you why something is important, I think is perfect. And everybody loves case studies. Everybody loves examples. And I think to the point that you raise around competitive, social competitive situations where if you see somebody that's in your industry doing something you're not doing, how do you ask yourself why, or how do you think about it in your own context? If you can see people that are winning, I think it does create that desire to make change.
That's a really good point. And, a lot of clients often ask us, what are others in our industry doing? And my response to that is, why do you want to be in second place or third place? Why not borrow ideas from other industries and apply them to your own market? So while Data Juice includes stories from a variety of industries, I encourage people not just to fixate on those in their own industry, but look at adjacent industries or even those that are non-adjacent and gather some ideas and think about how to maybe tease them apart and put them back together for your own business. And this is what we do in the data monetization workshops that we run for clients.
Well, and I think you raise a great point around, I heard a comment made recently around, if you think about best practice, it's moving people to the middle. It's not actually best. And so I think what you've done is you've got great examples that, to your point, can be reconfigured or repurposed given a different industry context. But it really is important food for thought as you think about what's next for the business. So turning to your book, Data Juice, there are so many great examples and stories, and I'd love to chat with you about a couple of them. I loved all of the marketing examples, and there are many. So story number 9, marketing. And something that I love about being a marketer and being focused on digital is the ability to test and learn is incredible and fast. And it is amazing to get feedback on whether it's a message or an ad or what have you. But I loved that about your 9th story in the book about, how do you experiment? How do you run A/B tests? How do you get information that's going to inform? And how do you enable your campaigns to get smarter, each one after the next? Anything that you would add about what you learned from that particular story?
Yeah, it's a great story about TalkTalk, one of the providers of TV and broadband and mobile in the UK, and how they really wanted to do a better job of acquiring and growing relationships with and retaining customers by more perfectly crafting their messages and how and when to deliver them. It's really something most B2C companies are dealing with already, as you mentioned. But interestingly, rather than standard categories of customers, their advanced analytics solution identified 200 synthetic kind of customer dimensions, as opposed to like the 20 standard dimensions available from, say, Google Analytics. And with this, like you say, they A/B tested a variety of different messages, which ended up resulting in a 60% improvement in click-through rate and a 200+% improvement in conversion rate. So a great story. And listen, this is not rocket science. It's something any organization should be able to do.
And then the other one that I wanted to chat with you about a bit is story number 21, substituting data for inventory. I mean, that's an interesting one, just in thinking about that headline of substituting data for inventory. How did that story come to be?
The concept of data as a substitute from inventory is interesting. It's something we talk about in the Infonomics class that I teach, which is, there are the 4 classic productivity factors: land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. And kind of what we talk about is how data is increasingly maybe a new factor of production, but certainly a substitute for those others. So the story of a cheaper, faster substitute for land, labor, and capital, and even creativity in many cases. So Otto Group is a $13 billion euro mail order commerce company that operates like in 20 plus countries. And they wanted to solve the customer experience problem of customers receiving their merchandise, beyond the 2 days of ordering, and customers receiving orders in too many, multiple shipments. And since it typically drop ships and doesn't really stock a lot of items itself, the only solution was either to grow that surplus stock, like a lot of online retailers do, or provide its suppliers with predictive ordering. So they decided to kind of experiment with and ultimately chose the latter. So now they have an AI system that can predict with about 90% accuracy the merchandise that will be sold within 30 days. And then it orders that merchandise automatically. And even, this has resulted in like a 20% decline in surplus stock that it holds in inventory.
That's amazing. What commonalities across the 2 Data Juice stories?
Yeah, so for these two stories, it's really about improving the customer experience and the relationship using advanced analytics and AI. Again, not dashboards and scorecards and stuff like that, but really AI baked into a business process, really digitalizing the process. I think in general, across all the stories, I find that most of them really have, again, nothing to do with hindsight-oriented analytics. It's about using data to diagnose or predict or prescribe something, often then to automate or digitalize some process. Also, I found most of the stories involve the use of external data, whether from social media or harvested web content, open data, or from partners.
How do you help our customers think through data monetization? What's the process that you walk through? I would suspect that there's a bit of a inventory taking that is needed to understand what's what and what's where. But how do you think about data monetization?
I kind of laid out in Infonomics an overall approach to taking a product approach to data monetization. And I think that's really at its core, is taking that product approach. So we start with these facilitated workshops where understanding what kind of data assets are available, both inside and outside the organization, what are its kind of mission and drivers, because so we kind of stay focused on what's most important to the organization. Are they more focused on reducing risk or generating revenue or growth or managing costs? Very often those primary dimensions are something that you can't really attack head on. So we're also looking at the kind of the secondary drivers of the business. Then we're also looking at who are the potential stakeholders who might find value in the data or data products or analytics or insights that we can generate. And we'll look both internally, across the various business functions, but also we'll look externally, and not just at the obvious players like your immediate partners and suppliers and customers, but also at what we call the extended business ecosystem of who are your partners' partners, your suppliers' partners, your partners' suppliers, your customers' suppliers, your partners' customers, and so forth. And then even outside that to industry associations, government organizations, hedge funds, et cetera, who might find some of these insights that you have about your market or products or processes or machines valuable. Then we're looking at a variety of use cases and again, trying to kind of inspire some creativity. How can we take some of these other examples and tease them apart and put them back together? One of my favorite examples of applying a concept from one industry to another is the police department in the city of Los Angeles. Somebody had the idea that crimes somewhat follow a pattern that looks like seismic aftershocks. Maybe they were just joking or whatever, but then they kind of sicked the data scientists on it and realized that if they actually applied the seismic prediction models to where follow-on crimes are going to occur and deployed resources there, they were able to reduce violent crimes across the city by like 30%. That's a really fun example of applying a model to another industry. And then we run a number of hypothesis-generating activities where we're looking at using data not in a hindsight fashion, but how can we use data to diagnose or predict or prescribe or automate or digitalize something. We try not to focus on things around building pretty pie charts and bouncy bar charts. In all the examples that I've compiled, very, very few of them are based on simple hindsight-oriented analytics like that. The real high-value examples that are generating measurable benefits are much more advanced in nature. So then what we do is we take these ideas and then we kind of sort them based on a variety of feasibility criteria. We have about 10 or so different feasibility criteria. We look at how complex they are, how well the organization could manage it. Are they operationally feasible? Are they legal, ethical? Are they scalable? Are they marketable? And we look at all these UBLs to determine how to prioritize them. Because in these ideation workshops, we'll typically come up with anywhere from 50 to 60 or 70 different ideas. So obviously, we have to prioritize them. And then it's a matter of kind of going through the new product introduction or product management approach in terms of how those products are designed, developed, rolled out, supported, et cetera.
What advantage does data monetization give companies?
So data monetization programs are really an excellent way to mature beyond, like I said, just reporting and analytics. Everybody's very comfortable doing reporting and analytics, generating dashboards and doing stuff in Excel and whatnot. But we find data monetization programs are also a great way to fund the data management program and the infrastructure itself. A great example of this is the retailer Dollar General, who, for example, has a self-funding data lake. After creating data products for its CPG, its consumer packaged goods suppliers that share information on pricing and inventory and shopping basket analysis and so forth. So I actually think data monetization is the ideal way to create a self-funding data and analytic infrastructure. And in fact, ought to be aspirational, I think, for any data and analytic leader or chief data officer. If they're not creating a plan or on the road to creating a self-funding data environment, either they're not measuring the value of that data and analytics well enough, or they're not thinking broadly enough about how to deploy data.
Doug, a related question to that, as you think about the list of hypotheses or the list of options coming out of a data monetization workshop, it sounds to me then that the first couple that you attack or go after could then be used to fund the next three, and then the next three, and then the next three, that it becomes a way to accomplish everything on your to-do list. And as somebody who loves a to-do list, I would love that approach.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It becomes a bit of a flywheel. In fact, we talk about the economic properties of data. Data is, a lot of people call data the new oil, right? You've heard that. It's probably hard to go a day or a week without hearing somebody mention that. Data certainly is a driver of the economy today, very much the way that oil was or started to be, over a century ago. But data has these unique economic qualities that oil doesn't have. When you consume a drop of oil, you can only consume it one way at a time. Once you consume it, it goes away, and then you can't use it again. Whenever you consume a drop of oil, it doesn't create more oil, all right? It turns into heat and energy and pollutants. So data is very different. Data is what economists would call a non-depleting, non-rivalrous, progenitive asset. That is, you can use it multiple ways simultaneously. You can use it over and over again, as long as it maintains some relevancy. Typically, when you do use data, you're in a position to capture more data about whenever and wherever that data was used. So the companies that are really thriving today are those that are taking advantage of those economic qualities of data, whether they kind of know it or not. I mean, we talked about the flywheel, so that's what Jeff Bezos talks about at Amazon, which is using data to create more data, to create customer engagement and so forth. And so it's that kind of flywheel that's really possible, I think, for any organization. You don't have to be an Amazon to take advantage of those characteristics. From an investor standpoint, we found that companies that are more data-driven are actually valued by investors by nearly 2 to 1 over other companies. And that data product companies, those that are really in the business of selling data or data derivatives or data products of some kind, have a market value that's nearly 3 times higher than the market average. So while the accountants don't care that data is an asset, in fact, they don't even recognize it as an asset under most circumstances, the investors certainly do.
Well, and I'm curious to see, do you think that accounting will eventually value data as an asset? Will that become a new balance sheet category?
Yeah, that's the $30 trillion question, right? Are we going to start recognizing data as an actual asset on balance sheets? That would, of course, require a lot of restatement of balance sheets. So listen, data clearly meets the criteria of an asset. I've written and spoken a lot about this. An asset is something that is owned and controlled, exchangeable for cash, and generates what accountants call probable future economic benefits. Clearly, data meets those criteria. It's just that the accountants haven't come around to acknowledging it. They have published some discussion papers on the topic, but really haven't, only under rare circumstances, allow data on the balance sheet. So this creates a situation where there's a lot of undue market volatility in the market because there's just no transparency into the data that organizations have or how they use it, certainly from an investment standpoint. But it also, on the other hand, gives companies a bit of an edge who are using data better because they can be opaque about it, which kind of shelters what they're doing perhaps from prying eyes of competitors.
Doug, when you're meeting a customer for the first time, how do you assess the data acumen or data know-how of an organization?
They say, listen, we're having these challenges. Our data's all over the place. We have a lot of silos. We're not governing it well. We're not using it to its full advantage. We're not organized well. We don't have the resources. We don't have policies or procedures. We don't have good metadata. So they usually tell us what the issues are. And in fact, we actually have a maturity model that kind of susses all that out and helps identify kind of where they are on a maturity spectrum along 8 kind of key dimensions, including culture, as we talked about, and then kind of how they can mature from there.
How can companies create a team with the shared goal and vision of data monetization? How do you see companies that get that right, make it right?
The first step is really the hardest. It's something executives really want to do, but they don't know where to start. For example, we're advising one of the largest manufacturers in the world now on setting up its data monetization function. They've identified a few people to run it, but they really don't have a vision or an operating model. And in fact, the people who are running it don't have any experience really with data products or any kind of product management. And they certainly haven't yet generated a set of prioritized data products to design and develop. So we're helping them with that. Another company we're advising has several business units that are clamoring to rock and roll with monetizing their data. They're capturing all sorts of data off the devices and products that they sell. They want to find ways to package and productize that and use it internally and make it available externally to improve customer service, customer engagement, partner engagement, and so forth. And so we're working with them to kind of coordinate this under hopefully what will become a branded data products business. But ultimately, I believe this should all be within the chief data officer's responsibility. And if you're unfamiliar with the creation and implementation and licensing of data products, then hire somebody away from one of the dozens of data brokers out there to run the program.
I have a question for you related to data monetization and industries, and I'll frame it up in this way. Last night, I caught up with two of our colleagues, Linda Jenny and Jennifer O'Brien, and Jennifer O'Brien mentioned having you in to speak, and that one of her private equity clients was very eager to work with you on a data monetization project. Would you say that private equity is a unique target for data monetization, or is it something that is relevant for all industries?
It's certainly a unique target, and definitely for West Monroe, given tech diligence deals that we do a year advising private equity firms and companies on M&A activities. I think anytime a company becomes a portco of a private equity firm, they're in a unique position to get some investment from the PE firm to improve their operations or improve the way that they're using data. And then even beyond that, the companies throughout the portfolio perhaps have an opportunity to share data among each other to kind of create a karetsu, as it were, like a Japanese karetsu, where they're sharing and exchanging data to kind of lift all ships. So it's something that we're looking at helping a number of our private equity clients and their portfolio companies with. One of them even is talking to us about doing kind of a Shark Tank exercise, where we work with the portfolio companies to generate those ideas. They bring those ideas to the private equity firm parent company, who kind of determines what they want to invest in. So that'll be kind of fun when that takes shape.
I think there's an interesting element of data and its power around, the sort of consortium effect, or if you have a number of portcos in the example that you just shared, that it feels like there's a bit of a multiplier effect around making that data more valuable, more meaningful. Is that the right way to think about it?
Yeah, I think so. It's difficult. A lot of companies do share data with each other, but maybe they don't do so in as much of a disciplined way as they can. And of course, there are restrictions on consumer data. One of the big concerns we get is, we can't monetize our customer data because of privacy regulations and GDPR and California Consumer Privacy Act and HIPAA and whatnot. And our answer to that is, maybe you're not being creative enough. Think about flipping that model on its head. Maybe you can't sell your data to others, but you can sell others related products and services to your customers without explicitly exposing who they are. So again, think about that within the context of a set of portcos who maybe are somewhat related but not competitive, sharing data among them or exposing their own customers to other related products or services could, again, be a way to grow the value of the entire portfolio in steps.
The example that comes to mind for me from my background was working with a company called PayNet that created a consortium of lenders, and it was sharing information such that you could create essentially a credit history report for small business. And small business is an interesting one because it's 60% of U.S. GDP, and when small business does well, the U.S. economy does well. And so it was this interesting give to get model in order to share that information in a meaningful way.
Yeah, there certainly are a lot of data brokers and data aggregators who are poised to be able to kind of create those consortia around data.
And there's an interesting set of use cases as well that, how does that relate to fraud or fraud prevention, or, what are some other use cases that emerge, as you think about that consortium or consortia of data?
Absolutely. Fraud's a classic example.
So as you think about, Doug, the books that you have written, where have they gone? I mean, where have some of those ideas landed, and how have companies received them and taken advantage?
Yeah, so many data and analytics executives and others have graciously reached out to me to say how Infonomics has changed their thinking on what data means and could mean to their organization, how it's helped them express the real value of data and the importance of data to business executives and boards and how they now even base their enterprise data strategy on these concepts. We just met with one major insurance company who told us, their CDO told us he even has branded the company's data management function as an Infonomics engine. So that really made me proud. But from a market perspective, we've seen a groundswell of interest from businesses to monetize their data and to create supplemental balance sheets that express the value of their data assets. Because the accounting profession doesn't yet allow data to be represented on the balance sheet. And so we're helping them use that value of data to embolden their data-related initiatives, to help them realize that maybe their data is costing them more than the value it's generating, so they ought to think about how to generate more value from it, or think about how to save costs by maybe moving to the cloud or something like that. So it's sort of a numerator and denominator thing where we help them assess the cost side of their data, but also the benefit side of their data, and try to expand the benefits while reducing the costs. And it's a great model.
As we have been talking, Doug, I reflect on, you are a teacher at your core in many respects, and you have worked with many companies, but then you also have shifted to teach at universities. And I wonder if it doesn't come back to the story that you shared at the very beginning of our conversation around having an experience with a teacher who sought to intimidate versus sought to enlighten. And so you have chosen the other path, which is the path to enlighten.
I think I have. And in fact, the first thing I tell my MBA students each term is that we're on this journey together. And while, I've kind of laid out the basics of how to think about and behave as if data is an asset, there's a lot we can learn and figure out together. So I encourage them that, we're on this journey. And it's interesting, the MBA students really take to that idea. The accounting students, not so much. The accounting students kind of want to be told what to do.
That's interesting. What's the difference between the two? Is it a different persona, would you say?
A difference in mentality in the profession, I guess. I don't know. But one of my favorite assignments I give the students is kind of building on that idea of economics. I say, pick any economic model, the more obscure, the better, and apply it to data. And again, does it hold? How would you revise it? What could people learn from this model? And so these students have generated these papers that are just groundbreaking on all sorts of economic concepts that I've never heard of, right? So things like Nash equilibrium, and one student even applied Sharia law to data, laws around lending. So really, really interesting. And my wife told me if I ever wrote another book, it would have to be titled How I Use Data to Find My Next Wife. But I think she might allow me to actually compile these papers into another book. So I'm looking at doing that maybe in 2024.
Do you have any working titles yet for this project?
No, it'll probably be an Infonomics 201 kind of thing. I don't know. That's the working title. But we'll see.
Well, as we wrap up, Doug, this has been a phenomenal conversation, and I so appreciate you taking time. How can our listeners stay in touch with you? How can they follow along with what you're up to?
Sure, yeah. LinkedIn is always a good way to follow or connect with me. I'd also love to invite our listeners to attend next summer's MIT Chief Data Officer Symposium, which I co-chair, or participate in the Carnegie Mellon Chief Data Officer Certificate Program, where I teach alongside some really brilliant academics and practitioners.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again, Doug. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Rissa.
Thanks for listening to This is Digital. If you enjoyed today's show, please follow or subscribe on your preferred podcast app. And don't forget to leave us a review. For more information on This is Digital, visit westmonroe.com/thisisdigital.